What's up, guys? Ben here, bringing you another video. Today is Monday after the week 3 of Major 2 qualifiers. Some interesting matches went down this weekend. As always, you know what video we're giving you on the Monday. We're going to break down tier list of teams heading into this week. Some interesting movement. I don't know if there's going to be a lot of movement. Honestly, I haven't contemplated anything before this video, so all my thinking is going to be live. But let's take a look at where the teams are ranked before this weekend and go one by one through all 12 teams. See if there's any movement. All right, so this is the tier list we had from the previous week, and as you can see, I mean, this has really been the thread through most of the season. There's 4 teams and there's everybody else. If you've never watched my tier list videos before, let me break it down to how I do it, because I don't do S, A plus, B, F minus, whatever. We do it this way: Sunday regulars or your top 4 teams at the top. The reason I call them Sunday regulars is because, well, top 4 teams, top 4 make it on Sunday. There you go. Potential contenders is anybody else I think has a chance to win an event. It was usually top 6 to top 8 teams last year. Work to do are teams that I think are solid, that potentially could be contenders, but I think they have some obvious flaws they need to work on. Maybe on the edge of a roster change, but not quite there. And missing pieces are teams that I think, unfortunately, the roster construction doesn't make sense, and I really don't think they have hope of winning. I think the best way to do this is probably start at the bottom today, because I don't think the top of order of teams or whatever is really going to change all that much. All right, let's start with Seattle Surge. They had 2 matches this weekend. They got 3-0 smoke showed by Toronto. No surprise there. And a surprising 3-0 victory versus LAG. I thought LAG would win that one, but we'll get to them in a second. So I think for Seattle, listen, you get 1 on the board, but maybe against the worst team in the league. I think there's still a lot of issues with this Seattle team, and just inability to win respawns. They have a big match coming up against Rocker next that could maybe kind of change some of the upside. But after that, they could have matches against Vegas and Boston to close out. I just think for Seattle, it's a little bit too late. And maybe there's a slight chance. Listen, if they go on a run here, they'll make winners bracket. But right now, I'm going to move them in front of LAG at the moment. But, you know, we'll see. This could be a big week for them. They can move up here if they get it going now. All right, next up, actually, let's talk about LAG. And I mean, this team's been just on a continual fall to grace, I think, for a few weeks now. And the Seattle series is ugly. I think it really kind of exposes a couple of the key things we've talked about LAG really over the course of the whole season. They're just not a great slaying team. They're not a great search team. They find ways to lose from winnable positions, especially that first map against Seattle was truly, I think, a massive choke. So I just cannot, in good conscience, sit here and say the LAG are a tier above this. I think clearly between Assault and Diamondcon, who's not having the best splits right now, one of them is going to have to go. And until then, they are sitting and missing pieces. And I think likely now the bottom team in the league, maybe. Because now we have the Miami Heretics, who are continue to also struggle. Recurring theme here at the bottom of this list. They've only had 1 match this week against New York. And it didn't go well. I mean, map 2 was pretty close, because I think Miami's actually pretty solid at Invasion S&D, but the other 2 maps were not on Subbase Hardpoint and on Invasion Control. I mean, I'm going to just slide them right here just because Seattle's got 1 win and Miami's got 0, but I mean, they're another team that at this moment, they're sitting here at 0-5. They're not making winners. They might not be making any CDL points to split. Carolina and Rocker coming up. Can they find the way to get some kind of victory on the board? I don't know. Let's keep it moving and grooving. We have the Carolina Royal Ravens, who had a tough matchup this week, and I thought they were fairly serviceable in the match against Optic. Optic was always going to outclass them, I think, in the respawns, but a really impressive high-rise S&D from Carolina, which you like to see. Improvement in search gave them at least 1 map in the series. Look, but continue to say the gaps in the top 4 and everybody else is massive. So these are going to be kind of bonus matches, I think, for Carolina. I'm going to leave them where they're at right now, because they have a very interesting part of their schedule coming up here. LAG, Miami, and Vegas are 3 teams that Carolina has a chance to beat. And if they do that, considering they beat Seattle earlier in the split, they would get in the winner's bracket. So huge 2 weeks coming up for Carolina. You've gotten through the tough parts of your schedule versus New York, versus Optic. Now you got some interesting matches. Can they convert and kind of work themselves up here to be sort of on the edge of the top 6? Top 8 conversation, or are they going to have a tough one, start and losers bracket, and likely be heading home before the weekend and Florida. All right, next up we have LA Thieves. And listen, I enjoy watching LA Thieves games with Samuel LaRue, aka Octane, because it's always a treat. And once again this week, they played a banger series, went up 2-0 against Rocker. Everything was good. And then a poor control and then a poor hard point in which Kremp inexplicably called a streak when he should have held it, and they got broken and lost on a P5 on Skid Row. Not as much drama on the Terminal S&D as you would have thought. And Krem kind of definitely made up for his mistakes in map 4 to close out that one. So another interesting one for Thieves. I am going to move them up a tier for now, just to kind of even things out. They're still on the edge of this conversation in my eyes, but they've now won back-to-back matches. So I want to give them their flowers. I still think this team's got to find a way to win Control A, sort of close out some of these series because they've almost gotten reverse swept. And B, the problem for Thieves is they got Vegas and FAZE coming up next, then LAG and Toronto. So I don't know how long they're going to stay in work to do here. Because 3 of those 4 are not matches I think I would pick them in right now. But I can see them losing to FaZe and then beating Vegas. They are going to play 2 matches a week for the next 2 weeks. So we're going to see them play a lot. Can they go 1-1 over both of these weeks? If they can be 4-3, I think that's a great split out of a tough one for Thieves. So let's see if they can keep their spot in this work to do tier. Next up, we have the Boston Breach. So they only have 1 match this week. It was against Vegas. I looked at the map set and I was like, okay, I think Boston's got a chance in this one. And just some critical mistakes. That first map, Boston's lack of real quality S&D play is a huge problem right now. And then sort of a gritty control invasion that went to around 5. Even though Boston got 3-0'd, it just wasn't their day. They didn't play well. And this is the problem with this Boston team now. We're seeing kind of both sides of the coin. They can grind out series against teams, but they can also kind of get 3-0'd. So I'm leaving them here for now because I still think the search is a huge problem. I don't know if they're over Thieves right now. And the problem for Boston, even though they're 2-2 right now, is they have Optic and FaZe coming up next, and then they got Seattle. So I expect them to lose next 2, and then likely beat Seattle to make to winners bracket. So they may be sliding backwards here in the next tier list video, but they guys still have a chance to make winners bracket if they can win one of their next 3 matches. Because the way that this split's going right now, with a lot of teams getting slammed, 3 wins will get you in to winners bracket. Not with a great seed, but it'll get you in a winners bracket. And then the team that beat Boston, let's talk about the Vegas Legion, who impressed once again this weekend. I think taking care of business. This has really been one of the bright spots in this split for teams that aren't named Toronto, FaZe, Optic, or New York. Vegas has looked great. Now they have had a fairly straightforward schedule during the split. They're not the only good team that they've really played is Toronto, and they lost to them. And they got Thieves, Seattle, and Carolina coming up. So there's a very good chance Vegas gets like 6 wins during the split, which would still be impressive that they're beating teams at their current level. There's not really much for me to nitpick with this team. I think the control has been fantastic. Honestly, that's been their real best game mode during the split. I like some of the S&D wins. The hard point has been 50-50, so I still think against top teams, they're not really going to have a chance. But if you're a Vegas fan, you've been looking for some upside with this team, and I got to give them credit. They figured this out with the one change, dropping Standy, picking up Geo. They've got a good chance in this split, I think, to get top 6 or top 8 at Florida and really kick it on from there, even though people like Pat are saying that Purge should be dropped. I will say the Purge thing. I think he's still got to figure out a way to get a couple more kills to really make this team very, very good, and maybe are one team of the potential contenders. But if you're a Vegas fan, good days ahead, because Thieves, I think, is a very winnable matchup for them. Seattle, same thing, and then Carolina. I really think they can get hot here and go on a 4-game winning streak going into the Florida event. And then unfortunately, we have the Minnesota Rocker, and this is a team that is really just kind of hit the bottom floor after this week for them in a while. Obviously, they were never going to be favored against their first matchup versus FaZe. And then against Thieves, they made valiant comeback, but the game 5 woes continue, and I just can't, really in good conscience right now, because they've lost to Boston, they've lost to Thieves, put them above those teams. So unfortunately, I'm moving Minnesota right here. They got Seattle coming up next. They lose that, they lose to Miami as well. I'm moving them down a tier. Right now, they're sitting on the edge of this. They've had a fall from grace with this massive 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 game losing streak. They're sitting here with being 0-5. They're going to start in losers bracket, and I really think that, unfortunately, I hate to say it with Minnesota, but might be time to make a change with this team, and I think Big Wake might be the one to go, because Lamar accuracy is playing great right now. You're getting good contributions from Reese and Linz, but Wake, I don't know how long you can wait for Wake to be the slayer they need on this team. So yeah, that's the bottom 8 right now. I feel pretty good about this sort of Vegas, Boston Thieves, Minnesota, and then Carolina, Seattle, Miami and LAG. Carolina could move up in this if we see them play a little bit more. Same with Thieves. Boston might be a little bit too high, but I need to see how the next 2 weeks go before we really feel good about this stuff. I feel good about the bottom 3. The next 4, 5, I'm not really sure. But let's talk about Sunday regulars, or as Pat may say, the only teams that he really cares about in the league. We have Optic Texas coming up first here. Optic has been in cruise control in this split, but to be fair, they've played mostly or all bottom teams so far, and they only had 1 match this week against Carolina. I think my only knocks on Optic are that the S&D still has a little bit of work to do. That high rise against Carolina was not particularly inspiring, but the hard point and the control have been good. 9-2 so far in both those game modes combined. So if you're an Optic fan, you're making good progress, but the bigger tests have not come yet. Boston, Toronto, New York to close out the split. Those are all 3 very interesting challenges. I expect Optic to beat Boston. The next 2 are going to be huge for this team. So let's see where they land, but they are in winner's bracket. We'll have a good seed, and I like their chances in Sunday regulars. But if they lose a couple of these games, might have to move them down a tier because they may not be sort of in the same boat as Toronto, FaZe, and New York right now. So we'll see. All right, New York subliners coming off that big win against FaZe game 5 last week. They promptly took care of business against Miami. They are undefeated in this split with LAG and Optic coming up on their schedule. Is a very good chance that New York will be on 6 or 7 wins come Florida event. And the key thing for me with New York is how clean the respawns have been and how clean the search has been. They've just been really in cruise control during this split. And I think if you're a New York fan, you can feel pretty good about where this team is at going into the Florida event. I think the only thing I'd like to see New York work on is probably play invasion control probably one more time in one of these splits and feel good about it. The S&D map pool is great. The hardpoint map pool is solid. They are avoiding Rio right now, and I would like to see them maybe also throw that in the mix because it's going to present some interesting challenges when they play a FaZe or Toronto or an Optic. But so far, so good for New York. Let's see what they can do going forward. But I like them in the 3rd spot right now. Even though they beat FaZe, we'll get to why I think FaZe should be in the 2nd spot currently. All right, and we'll get to FaZe. And they played 2 matches this week. 3-0'd Minnesota, I thought was a fairly clean 3-0 out of the FaZe boys. Really start to finish. I think the S&D was a little close, but other than that, it was pretty clean. And then they played Toronto, and I was surprised by the map set. I thought, maybe Toronto could have gone in a couple of different directions, being Team A, but instead FaZe took care of business. The only close map was the 2nd map in this series. I think if you're a FaZe fan, look, clearly this week, I think they've definitely changed around a bunch in their search game. It seems like they're playing more together, running more together, which is nice because they weren't doing that against New York, and they have looked clean in search since then. Still undefeated and control the split. They are probably the best control team in the game right now. And the hard points have been really good. And I think especially Karachi and Rio are the 2 bread and butters of this team has right now. So that is a great sign if you are a FaZe fan. Taking down Toronto, you weren't able to beat so far this season. A great sign. The remaining pieces of FaZe's schedule are fairly easy. Thieves, Boston, and LAG. So I really think FaZe probably going to be 6-1 going into the Florida event with a top seed. So I am going to leave them in the 2nd spot. I'm going to give Toronto the benefit of the doubt. This is a little bit of a wake-up call, and they're going to get back to their winning ways. But I think we're getting to a point now where Optic, New York, and FaZe are having good splits. They're starting to catch up to Toronto, and I think we're setting up for a very interesting event. And let's finish off talking about the Toronto Ultra, because I think up until this FaZe match they were in cruise control, but I think this one is a little bit of a warning sign to this Toronto team that has one of their players has talked a lot about how lack of fun he's having in the game. I think that they've lost a couple of searches during this, but they've lost a couple of controls, they lost a couple of hard points. That sort of blemishless record that they had during the stage 1 split, is gone, and FaZe finally, took them down on I think Toronto's on like a 13-game win streak. They're on a 12-game win streak going back towards the middle of Major 1 qualifiers. The map records are still very good for Toronto, but I have a couple of things you need to work on. S&D map pool, they're not a great high-rise S&D team. They don't play it. They don't play Terminal. I don't know if they're good at Rio Search. Even though they lost kind of a tough round 11 to FaZe. The map pool in S&D is a little bit of a concern with this Toronto team. Hardpoint is good, I think. I think they're set there. Control, I would like to see them get better at high-rise control. They tried it in this series, and it didn't work out. By try, I mean FaZe picked it because Toronto really didn't get a choice because they were Team A. You can only ban one. They didn't want to play FaZe on Karachi, which interesting. So for me, I think if you're Toronto, there's definitely some clear things for them to work on the next 2 weeks because teams are at the heels now. It's not cut and dry, and I think that you look at the map set now that they have against FaZe or Rio in the mix, and it's turned from what I thought was a very favorable map set when Rio wasn't into now FaZe. If you're playing 2 Rios or a couple of high rises a series against FaZe, like I don't feel confident in Toronto right now in that matchup. It's funny how things swing like that. So Toronto have Optic and Thieves coming up. They only play 1 match over a week for the next 2 weeks. They've gotten their 2 match a weeks over the course of the last 3 weeks. They got to improve some of these things going into this event. They're going to, listen, they're probably going to have either 5 or 6 wins. They're going to be a top 4 seed at this event, but it's going to be really hard to repeat with the form they're in right now. A bit of a warning sign this weekend from Toronto, but I'm going to leave them at number 1 because they are your Major 1 champions, and we haven't seen land matches against these teams. So I don't want to really shuffle this order right now. So yeah, I feel pretty good about this ranking. There's just no one for me to put in that like obvious fit spot right now. I think Vegas right now is the front runner, but I can't put them in potential contenders because I don't see them beating Toronto, FaZe, New York, or Optic. I don't see Boston doing it. I don't see Thieves doing it. Rocker had a great chance over the last couple of weeks and they couldn't close out. So that'll do it for this video. Let me know what you think of the tier list. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe for more. We got probably a Q&A video coming this week. I'm gonna break down the results of Challengers Elite later on in the week. We'll get my predictions. I'm also probably gonna do a video maybe tomorrow on where I think some of the awards kind of stand going into this event. I think it is about time for talking about that. So be on the lookout for that. As always, guys, we'll see you on the next one.